always say that just because I stopped drinking alcohol doesn't mean that I wanted to stop drinking. There's so much culture, there's so much lifestyle, there's so much connection that's based around food and beverage, but definitely beverage in this category is that people want to celebrate with something. They want to cheers something when they sit down for dinner. They want to have something paired with their food when they go out in a social environment.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. All right. Well, I wanted to introduce our very special guest on the podcast today. Michelle Houston is the co-founder of the Be Honest Beverage Company, known as Be Honest Bev Co. And I want to share a little bit about Michelle and a little bit about To Be Honest with you to kind of cue up this episode where we talk about her journey, the challenges and the celebrations that come with starting a non-alcoholic beverage company and all the good things in between. So Michelle Houston never planned to start a non-alcoholic spirit company, but then again, she never planned to give up alcohol either. A lifelong lover of craft cocktails, she spent years navigating the drinking culture of social events, business networking, and the booze-soaked hospitality industry. But when she ditched alcohol in 2021, she realized something was missing, a truly elevated, complex, and satisfying alternative. So she created To Be Honest Beverage Company, a bold, hemp-infused spirit line designed for those who want to drink differently without sacrificing taste, ritual, or fun. Now she's on a mission to make alcohol-free indulgence just as sexy, social, and satisfying as the real thing. And so this premium non-alcoholic spirit brand, To Be Honest Beverage Company, is crafted for those who crave a sophisticated drinking experience without the effects of alcohol. With complex, bold flavors and a touch of functional infusion, To Be Honest is redefining what it means to sip mindfully. All right. Well, I am so excited to introduce you to Michelle and to invite you into this conversation where we talk about all things alcohol-free and learning to drink differently. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast, and I am excited and delighted to introduce you to a new friend, Michelle Houston, and Michelle is going to tell us about her beverage company, To Be Honest Beverage Company. I love that. So tell us, Michelle, a little bit about your story as it came to creating a non-alcoholic beverage.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the founders in this space have kind of a little bit of a similar story in terms of their own personal journey with alcohol. So mine started several years ago. It's been almost 3 years since I stopped drinking altogether. And when I initially stopped drinking, it was for the reasons of mental health and anxiety. And I was really suffering with basically the backlash of alcohol. Drinking alcohol felt great. Lots of fun, social, at home with my husband. But I was kind of getting to a point where emotionally it was starting to affect my motivation, my energy levels, even just my focus and how I was showing up. And at the time, I was teaching and coaching in the fitness and health space. And I just kind of felt like I wasn't modeling the behavior that I wanted to on a day-to-day basis and from like a really wellness, conscious lifestyle. And so when I started the non-alcoholic kind of journey and transition, it wasn't with the intention of stopping forever. But 1 week kind of led to 2 weeks and then several months and then a year. And the further I got away from alcohol, the better I felt, the more that I feel like I successfully showed up in my life, the better my relationships were, like my entire health and wellness and well-being was affected. And so it just kind of motivated me to keep going. So, several months into that process, my husband, who has been in alcohol production for the past 10 years, he's opened up a brewery, sold, and then has more recently, in the past several years, co founded a cidery for hard cider. And so, he's been in the beverage manufacturing space and very aware of the direction of the alcohol industry altogether and how the non alcoholic segment has been impacting the alcohol industry. And so he wanted to create a non alcoholic beverage option. And so, with my exploration and change away from alcohol, we started exploring what's on the market, what's available, functional, non alcoholic spirits, RTD, and canned options. And we just kind of felt like we were lacking a sophisticated, functional beverage that had texture, flavor, that gave you that kind of experience and feeling of drinking, but without all the after effects. And so, to be honest, initially started as an RTD and canned option, but we pivoted to a bottle. So it's a 750 milliliter bottle and really just kind of offers that replacement in your liquor or cocktail that gives you the kind of sophisticated, elevated drinking experience that you sometimes miss when you don't have alcohol in your life.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Thank you for the background. It's really powerful to learn from our own experience and to, take a step back and think, what is missing in this? Because there are now a lot of non-alcoholic beverages out there, certainly beers and even some wines. My daughter happens to be in the wine industry, and so I get to be the taster for all of the products that come along in the de-alcoholized wine. And so we see these kinds of options, but I think where we still have room to grow is exactly what you're talking about, is these more sophisticated options that allow us to have some fun and some ritual around preparing an adult beverage. And I love to think of these as an adult beverage, Michelle, because I think that it doesn't matter if they are, you know, um, including alcohol or non-alcohol. I think we get to have an adult beverage because we are adults and we get to create something that's fun and enlivens our day-to-day or special occasions. And I love that you hit on something that was really missing in the market.
Well, I always say that just because I stopped drinking alcohol doesn't mean that I wanted to stop drinking. There's so much culture, there's so much lifestyle, there's so much connection that's based around food and beverage, but definitely beverage in this category is that people want to celebrate with something. They want to cheers something when they sit down for dinner. They want to have something paired with their food when they go out in a social environment, even from a networking perspective. If you're going to an event, a gala, a fundraiser, a social happening, you want something in your hand, and a drink can often be that tool to be able to connect with other people that calms you down or makes you feel more comfortable in order to converse and share. And so we felt like that was really missing. Now, over the past several years since I've stopped drinking, we are seeing a ton of non alcoholic options really flood the market, some better than others. And so it's meeting that need of celebration, of ritual, of experience, and just having it be something that's a little bit more beneficial. Those people who are looking for more health and wellness based options, we're coming from a background in space where the non alcoholic industry, whether you had a mocktail on the menu or whether you were getting something in a can or bottle, is so sugar laden or has a ton of fake ingredients. And so as we see the industry kind of evolve, we're welcoming in more options that cater to adults, that give you something that isn't just going to be a either non-flavorful or too sugary option that feels like a child could have it as well, or it's just kind of like an afterthought. We always want our consumer, and one of the kind of mission-driven pieces of our brand is ensuring that the person imbibing gets to be the main character of their story. And so often they're the afterthought. And so often they're, oh, there's lemonade behind you, or do you want water? Or there's, a soda, fountain soda option. And so having these more crafted, elegant, flavorful options makes someone really feel included in the experience, whether that's a barbecue or a dinner or, again, a fundraiser. It just kind of gives you a different feeling. And we're all about experience as human beings. We're looking for that connection piece. We're looking to feel included, and we want to feel like we're just as important as someone else who gets served wine or a cocktail or some other, elevated option.
Yeah, I love that. We get to be the main character, and we want to be, and we deserve to be. So, you've done something kind of unique with your product, and it is CBD infused, and you call it Focus. Will you tell us kind of the impetus behind that offering?
So, when I stopped drinking, again, because of mental health and anxiety, I wanted something in a beverage. And this is actually, when you look at consumers, at least within the US, they're looking for two predominant things. They're looking for flavor and function. So, it's not to say that people don't want any type of experience with what they're consuming. They want something to be there, right? Otherwise, they might just drink water or something more simple like lemonade. And that's why you're seeing a lot of adaptogenic options on the market and a lot of these kind of adjacent categories that offer what we would call an experience. And CBD has been shown not just from an anti-inflammatory perspective, but also to help manage anxiety over time. So for me, it was more functional in that capacity to be able to help support the reason I stopped drinking, not just as like a sheer replacement, which I think for a lot of people can be very helpful when they start that transitioning process, but to be able to have some added benefit. We are seeking out teas or protein shakes or these other beverages that we're drinking with a specific goal in mind. It offers something additional instead of just, again, being flavored water or something that's going to be detrimental to our health. And so that's why we went with the hemp infusion and the CBD aspect from the beginning. That being said, we'll be looking at opening up to the adaptogenic or adjacent categories, continuing to provide some function. And the nanomultiplication of the CBD that we use and the process in which we put together our product, we really wanted complexity and texture to be a very important part of the spirit. So oftentimes, non-alcoholic spirits either disappear in the drink or the flavor doesn't blend well, it doesn't mix well with the other layers that actually create a crafted cocktail. And so that was one of our goals from a design perspective, to be able to offer that complexity and have you, when you're drinking the product in a beverage, in a cocktail, really feel like this is comparable. I feel it on my palate. I have the experience of drinking. As I continue to drink through the beverage, it doesn't get too sickly sweet. It doesn't get too watery. I can enjoy it throughout that entire process. So that was the reason that we initially went with the hemp infusion and that CBD aspect in the product.
So what can people expect when they drink this? Like, is it a mood enhancer? Is it a relaxant? Does it uh, have a different impact or effect on different individuals?
So we're not technically in the supplement category, but we do have to be really conscious from a marketing perspective or from a conversational perspective in letting people know how they're going to feel. So in all of our like advertising and when we communicate with consumers, we don't ever say this is exactly what's going to happen for you. But that being said, we can say that our customers have experienced certain things, or you may have the experience of. Everybody is so different, and we always advise individuals to connect with a healthcare provider, ensure that, especially with hemp infusion and CBD, that it's something that's okay for them to take. It can be contraindicated for breastfeeding, pregnancy, not advised for children, as well as certain medications, because similar to grapefruit, it can counteract the effect of the medication. So that's the first thing that I want to make sure is like driven home for most people is always ensure that you're doing your due diligence when consuming any option. And I know that there's a lot of adaptogenic things on the market that are like, oh, this is healthy for you, quote unquote. This is good for everyone. But not all of them are. There are certain supplementations, ashwagandha and other, root-based products and adaptogenic ingredients that can be not advised for certain demographics or even certain individuals. So I always encourage with this category to ensure that you are being intentional, you're doing, the research ahead of time, and you're making sure that it's right for you and that you can kind of experiment in that way. So as far as experience, what we typically advise is that for most people, it's a sense of well-being, a little bit of elation. It can be a mood enhancer in that way, where people feel stress relief, calm, relaxation, and that kind of like little bit of like extra elevated positive energy. We do have consumers who experience an elevated sense of focus. CBD has a tendency to kind of quiet things down, especially if you have the type of mind that is going a lot of different directions or tends to worry. And that's why it's been supported from a study based perspective with anxiety. Because anxiety tends to be that overactivation of worry. You're thinking about the future, you're thinking about the past. And so, with a CBD or a hemp infusion, you're able to kind of reduce some of that noise and find the focus, find the relaxation, find the calm associated with that.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And it really is powerful to have something that goes beyond just flavor, like you said, with function, so that we're understanding that there are ways that we can use a crafted drink to have an experience that is part of our well-being. And part of my background, Michelle, is I trained as a functional nutritionist. And so, like you, coming from the wellness space, really understanding that certain things can really enhance our well-being, and not necessarily just CBD, but certainly some adaptogenics, and then things like even using vinegar, in a shrub,
Mhm.
like you said, certain teas. Really thinking about gut health and where we can elevate wellness in addition to just simply having the pleasure of an adult beverage. So I think this emerging field is really exciting. I'm curious about your husband's background, both with the cidery and brewery. What have been the challenges for creating a non-alcoholic product compared to these traditional models of, beverages that are out in the world?
The non-alcoholic space, although growing, and when you look at it from a social perspective, so many people that we speak to are like, oh, that's so huge now. We're seeing mocktails on the menu. Sober curious. It's a community. It's a lifestyle. It's growing. People are really into that. Ultimately, the adult non-alcoholic space really only takes up about 4% of the larger alcohol industry. And when you look at it on that scale, it is still small. It's really in its infancy from a niche category perspective and is continuing to grow. So I think the challenges come with it still being not entirely understood or figuring out where the category places your particular type of product. So I was in some conversations with some other founders in the CPG and startup space recently, and that was kind of the thing. Okay, if we're looking for distribution, if we're looking for scale, if we're looking to be placed on shelves in a grocery or retail outlet, if we're getting into bars and restaurants, how do we fit into this space? If you're looking at brands like Tennyson, for example, they create a product that's outside the confines of what you would traditionally think of a spirit option. So they're not trying to be a whiskey, they're not trying to be a gin, they're not trying to be anything. They're creating their own category. And so it's a new functional alternative option that's available to sip predominantly on its own or could theoretically be mixed with other things. So where do you put it? Do you put it with non-alcoholic? Do you put it with the liquors? Where is that happening? And then from a consumer perspective, how are you educating them? Our particular products do replicate spirits themselves. So, gin, whiskey, tequila. We only have Focus, which is a gin inspired alternative right now, and we'll continue to add SKUs over time. But having people even understand that is sometimes challenging. We did a lot of customer discovery in the past year, lots of markets and in person activations. We were speaking with customers, people who had stopped drinking or looking to cut back on alcohol. And a lot of questions that they have are, well, how do you use it? When would I use it? What does that look like in a home environment? How do I make it up with other things? Do I want to get complex and add in syrups, or can I just mix it with a soda? And so having people really conceptualize and understand how to use that type of product is, I think, one of the biggest challenges. You have beer and wine, which are so much replicating beer and wine, and people already know how to consume those, which is, I think, why, especially if you look at non-alcoholic beer, why that category tends to be a bit larger and why people accept it more. I think that as a non-alcoholic beverage brand and what we're seeing in the industry, there's definitely going to be a lot of growth that needs to happen. There's definitely going to be a lot of consumer education as well as retail and distribution education. Beverage buyers are looking at their margins, their ability to do volume, how things function on a shelf or in the space that they're selling. And there's a lot of complexities to it. And there's a lot of ways that things have always been done. And we might not always fit easily into the way that they see things happening in a traditional format. So there's a lot of that and consumer education about the type of product that we're putting into the market. I think for us in particular, we've struggled with the differentiation between CBD and THC. There's a lot of folks who don't understand that distinction. And so, from a marijuana derived THC perspective, you're looking at anything that's psychoactive. It's an intoxicant. It's going to give you a sense of high. It's going to change your perception of things around you. Whereas our industrial hemp derived CBD has no intoxicating effects. It is not a psychoactive. It is just kind of the physical relaxation, stress relief that I spoke to. But people have a really hard time separating those things. And so we have struggled on that front to help people understand really what CBD is, how it functions in the body, and how someone can utilize our product in a home environment.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I know for me, so I studied with This Naked Mind Institute. And if you think about just the title of This Naked Mind, I am not interested in altering my reality. And so I remember in my podcast previously, I interviewed a gentleman and his partner who were doing a CBD tincture, and I wanted to try it, but I was like, I don't want to feel anything, that is going to take me back to the way that I felt out of control when I was drinking alcohol. And so I think it really is an important point. And I think that, yes, lots of education needs to be done. And I also think that it's kind of scary how, we've got drinks. Well, I was in Colombia recently. And of course, it's a different country, but we're just seeing like ready to drink cans that are THC infused. And I think people can, with misunderstanding, become sort of afraid of the entire category because they don't clearly understand the difference. And I think it takes a sophisticated crowd and it takes that additional layer of education to understand what a drink with CBD enhancement would offer.
Yes, there is a lot of confusion in the market. And part of that is from a beverage brand perspective. Part of that is just we really haven't had access to a hemp infused CBD alternative for that long. With the advent of the 2018 Farm Bill, that's technically not that long ago. And when you have industries that have been in place for decades, the ability to catch up with that is going to be slower. And unfortunately, even just from the perspective of legislation, if you're looking at California, Gavin Newsom put out a bill late last year in 2024 that affected, THC being sold and marketed within regular grocery stores. And ultimately, that's always been the case. But I think beverage brands started to take advantage of the gray area within legislature right now from a CBD THC perspective. And so they were pushing RTD, THC heavy products when they shouldn't have been in the first place. So that all had to be recalled and changed. But when that happens, in the mind of a retailer, a wholesaler, a restaurant owner, or even a consumer, if they don't fully understand the distinction, they're going to categorize everything in the same place and in the same way. And so they're just going to say, oh, any THC product is bad, or CBD is the same as THC. And so it's harder for them to distinguish. Now, legally, federally, anything that is under 0.3% THC is considered a CBD product and not able to be sold in dispensaries, where all of your THC-based products, anything higher than that, should only be sold in dispensaries. There's a lot more regulation and control for the cannabis industry on that front. And although the CBD and hemp-infused space is growing, there's still some gray area. There's still some legislature that isn't in place necessarily for certain aspects of the sale or of the production. It's not heavily regulated as it probably should be. And so I think that as legislature changes, as regulatory things open up, I think that we'll be able to carve out more space within the industry. And I think that the future of hemp infusion is going to be big and much more popular because it doesn't have that intoxicating effect. But we're still kind of waiting for that to be the case. And that's why I think having adjacent lines or branching into the functional space, either with nootropics, adaptogens, other like you said, more vinegar-based things, mushroom-based options are going to be helpful and positive at this particular time. And then with the growth of the category, we'll hopefully see things changing and have consumers understand a bit better and be more open and welcoming to the category.
Yeah, I think that what we're really talking about here is buyer beware. Like, you really have to do your own independent research and understand what it is when it comes to these different beverages. And so, yeah, that is just sort of an additional challenge for you guys with having this intention to create something that is that serves that anti-anxiety sort of piece that you are very focused in. I noticed on your website, Michelle, that you guys do have a give back campaign to support mental wellness. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So that's something that's going to expand in terms of our profitability. We're still in the very initial stages of startup. We're like small. We haven't done any initial large scale fundraising. We're actually in the process of just launching our friends and family fundraising round. So the first initial year of launch was really about test marketing. It was bootstrapped. We received one small grant and we just invested everything that we made in the company back into the brand and building that awareness, getting new wholesale accounts, being available online. But eventually we want to partner in the mental health space. There's actually a larger organization called Wondermind that we intend to hopefully partner with on a larger scale. And the focus of supporting mental health, specifically in the anxiety space, is where we want to be able to give back. Now, we've been able to do more like partnerships, collaboration, gifts in our local community, whether that's Planned Parenthood, our Independent Film Festival, other nonprofits that we participate in, just by being present or sampling and giving out beverages. Typically, when we set up a table, we're making mocktails. So we're actually giving out drinks and being able to participate in that sense. And so that's been a part of our initial year to get launched, but ultimately we'll want to fund specific programs. I also volunteer on a nonprofit. It's an endowment fund. It's held under our local community foundation of San Luis Obispo County, and I sit on the committee for Women's Legacy Fund. So it's specifically an endowment fund that is geared towards women and girls programs, and we sponsor large-scale grants, 10,000, 20,000, more than that, for certain programs that target the support of financial literacy, mental health, childcare for women. So my goal with To Be Honest is to be able to replicate some of those concepts and have an arm and branch of our organization that specifically gives back to that mental health category, and ideally in the large grant formation or in some way from a sum to specifically support programs that fulfill in entirety. So from a nonprofit perspective, oftentimes you can give $100, $10, $1,000, which is great. It kind of goes into a pool. But my goal would be to say, this is a pilot program that we're launching for teen girls in a middle school setting. And we're going to run this program for a semester, and this is what it's going to incorporate. And so my goal with To Be Honest Beverage is to be able to give back specifically to programs who have that kind of targeted impact in that way.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Such a great mission. And what I find, Michelle, with so many of the purveyors in this space is that it really is a passion, mission driven, business. It is beyond just the profit. Obviously, you're in the startups. There's no profit at this point. Um, we've talked a little bit about the challenges. Will you share some of the highs of what you have loved and things that have surprised you in this first couple of years in your business?
It really is passion, Terry. I'm kind of, chuckling over here because the CPG space is not a super friendly space from a business perspective. There are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of roadblocks, there are a lot of, issues when you're producing food and beverage for public consumption. There are so many things that come along with that. And then when you're thinking of growth or scale, you have distribution, you have wholesale, you're getting into these different places, you've got direct to consumer, and there are so many ways in which things can ultimately go wrong. And you have to invest a lot in order to have the consumer awareness to be able to purchase the product, to be able to fulfill the volume and the sell-through rate that large retailers are expecting now. So this is not a category that I would say someone would just get into to quote unquote make money, especially if they didn't have money to get into it. And so many of the founders, which is ultimately one of the biggest highlights that I've had so far in starting the brand. There are a few things that I'll mention in terms of, that have been rewarding and why we want to pursue the brand and continue the brand is connecting with the other founders. Do you have a mission and intention? The non-alcoholic space is mostly incredibly friendly. There are always going to be brands that are maybe a little bit more competitive, which is understandable. Like at the end of the day, you do have to think about your business and the growth of your business. But I have a conversation with David Fudge from Aplo set up next week in order to connect. And their brand is a brand that I look to for inspiration as a model in terms of how they've been able to grow and be successful, but he's willing to have a conversation with me. So that type of support and connection that I've had with other founders, either reaching out through, there's an entity called Startup CPG that I leverage. It's a Slack platform. They do webinars and education. We're a part of the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, ANBA. They partner with Derek Brown to be able to host the Mindful Drinking Fest in January every single year, as well as support non-alcoholic brands in this space. And so the ability to connect with other people who are very mission driven to encourage sober, curious drinking and ultimately change an industry. Like we don't always think about it on a day-to-day basis, but we're at the forefront of a movement, and sober, curious drinking lifestyle, non-alcoholic, alcohol-free, low ABV, it's really a movement. And so being part of that and seeing other people who are so driven and led by positively impacting other people's lives has been a huge highlight of the brand. And then just on the other side of that, from a consumer perspective, being able to connect with our customers and hear their stories of shifting from alcohol to alternative options or finding a product like ours is huge. And I'll share a couple just to demonstrate is, a daughter buying the product for her dad who's going through chemotherapy, or someone was excited to see us at a market, came up, introduced himself. He had stopped drinking about 6 months ago because it had gotten to the point where it was impacting his marriage and his relationship with his daughter, that his wife said that he would leave him if he didn't make a change. To someone who is looking to adjust it for their health. They can't sleep at night. They're dealing with other health conditions and concerns that are impacting them so much that they need to get away from alcohol. And so when you realize that a simple product can have such a huge impact on someone's life, that's when, you get all the emotion, you get all the feels, you get all the reminder, okay, even though I'm struggling right now through this fundraising round, even though I'm struggling to put this pitch deck together, even though I'm struggling with our packaging, even though I'm struggling with all the aspects of what it takes to be able to get this product across the country, you are reminded by those simple testimonials, those customer stories, and the experiences. Someone stopped me. Two stories. Someone has stopped me before and said, "Oh my God, we get your product. We used to have a cocktail every single night, but it just wasn't doing good things for us. And so now we sip on TBH in a cocktail in the sauna. It's a great time for my husband and I to reconnect, and we don't have any hangover after effects waking up the next day." And so as a real estate professional, that's very helpful in my line of work. Two, going into an appointment, the person behind the desk is like, "Thank you so much for your product. Didn't even know that you got our product." And she said, "Yes, I was really struggling with alcohol addiction and blackout, wasn't positive, totally throwing my life into chaos. But when I started and tried to stop in the past, I didn't find anything that really fit the need. And so therefore I'd go back to alcohol." And having something like our product, CBD from a science-backed studies perspective can actually aid in the transition from addiction. It's not an addictive quality on its own, and it's been known and seen to help with alcohol and heroin addictions. And so knowing that it's just meeting the need for people, not just as, oh, I need to have like a drink option, that's fulfilling an aspect of their lives that then opens up other opportunities for change, for growth, for connection, for relationships. That's the reward. That's the positive. Those are the things that kind of keep us going, especially in the startup phase of feeling, that we do face these challenges and that it's a long road ahead and that there's so much that can become overwhelming. So that's what I just continually have to remind myself of. And those have been the most successful slash rewarding pieces of what we've been able to do so far.
Yeah, it really is something that we have to, remind ourselves of how powerful what we're doing is. And we really are these disruptors. Like you said, we are still, this is in such its infancy. And we're seeing people, and you and I being in this space, it feels like, well, everybody's talking about non alcoholic drinks
Yeah.
but the reality is so many people are clueless. And I think what's really powerful too, Michelle, is that you've hit on probably one of the top reasons that people struggle with not drinking alcohol. And it is that state of relaxation. It is a place where they feel like they can turn off their brain at the end of the day. They can remove themselves from the situation of feeling like they're always on. So many of us in this hyper productivity, focused, intense work environment, life, even if you're not working outside of the home, so much is happening at such a rapid pace that we struggle to get a chance to feel like our brain slows down to the point that we can catch our breath. And I see that this opportunity to use a functional beverage really can be powerful in that process for people understanding like, hey, I do deserve to have a way to turn my brain down, to feel relaxed, and I don't need to have the negative impact of alcohol.
I used to work, in the health and wellness sphere. Part of my focus was habit formation. And so often from a behavioral aspect, we're just looking for something to kind of fit that need. And you're right, the stress relief and relaxation is so much a part of the habit. It's the neurological reward that you get when you grab your drink. And for some people, that's just popping a beer at the end of the day. That literal sigh of relief that things are done, you're closing that chapter, you're now transitioning to your evening time and when you're going to relax. And so, they say from a habit formation perspective, if you're trying to break a habit, it's better to replace it or shift it in an adjacent way as opposed to just cutting it out altogether. Some people, cold turkey, 180, it works for them. But for most of us, we need to be able to replace or find some similar reward pattern that's going to meet the need of that previous habit. And so having something like this that gives you the calm, that gives you the stress relief, really kind of leads you into that space just a little bit better. And it's not to say that it's an all the time or a forever thing. And I will say that we market particularly to the sober curious community because a lot of our customers are not necessarily 100% sober, but they have the desire to stop drinking as much or drinking less or not drinking Monday through Friday. And what they find is that the more they start to integrate positive options, the less that they are inclined to drink altogether. And we think about it from a health perspective as well. It's not about what you're cutting out or giving up, because when you fixate on those things, then you're focused on the lack of it. I don't get to have these things. I have to cut out sugar and dairy and this and that, or whatever it is that you're trying to focus on. But, from a nutritionist perspective, what are you integrating? What are you welcoming in? How can you be abundant in this process and how can you enjoy it? And so when you find alternatives that are positive for you in that regard, then you have something that's like, oh, I get to look forward to this option. And whether that's our product or a different product that has either some sort of function or just some sort of meeting the need that isn't super sugary, that kind of fills that void and meets the habit, then you'll start to see that it's a really positive experience as opposed to ugh, I don't get to drink alcohol anymore. Now I'm mad about not being able to drink and I am putting pressure on myself. And then maybe I do have a drink and then I'm guilty and shameful and embarrassed about the process. And so there's so much psychology that really goes along with it for those who are working toward that experience process kind of away from alcohol.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, Michelle, because I do, people will ask, is it safe for me if I have an addiction to alcohol to replace it with something that tastes like alcohol or seems like alcohol? Like, particularly the NA beers we find are taste very much like the real product. And so I think, to your point, we have to understand the psychology behind what our replacement means to us. So I always tell people to explore, what are you making this mean? If it is a beautiful ritual to enhance an experience that you want to participate in, that is very different than feeling like desperate to have something that is that replacement. And so I think there's a lot of layers when it comes to that. And I love that there are options for people to do it in whatever way serves them best.
And it's so important to navigate this process in a way that works for you. And so I've had a lot of conversations and been to several events hearing different perspectives that are coming at it from different angles. So I had a conversation and watched a talk by Laura Cathcart Robbins, who's a sober author. And in discussing with her afterwards, she says that she will never go near non-alcoholic or alcohol-free alternatives because for her, it's a slippery slope. So if you are drinking a non-alcoholic wine, a non-alcoholic beer, you're having a non-alcoholic cocktail, if for you that pushes you into that kind of danger zone as a sober person, then it's not worth whatever happens afterwards. And that's why, again, we don't necessarily market or specialize in the sober community, but rather the sober curious community. And then we've heard lots of stories of those who have dealt with different addictive responses to alcohol, who have had different experiences. And Ian Blessing from All the Bitter shared this story. And I love his perspective is when he started transitioning, he was looking for different options and he tried AA and was trying non-alcoholic alternatives, but there was so much kind of like pressure to not do non-alcoholic alternatives because it didn't work for other people. But for him and his wife, it did. So that community wasn't right for them because they felt fine having non-alcoholic options. And it was a really positive way for them to transition over time. And of course, we know with All the Bitter in their category and the brands that they collaborate with and what they've been able to create as an entity in the non-alcoholic space and opening up their bottle shop, they have carved out a huge aspect of this community and support the sober curious and the sober people who are part of this process, but they did it differently. So I think it's important for each person, whether you're a Laura Cathcart Robbins who can't go near non-alcoholic alternatives or whether you're an Ian Blessing and can, and it's positive for you. I think it's the self-awareness that comes through the process and understanding how it's going to work in your life, how you can handle it, and what that looks like for you, whether it's in a personal or social environment, because we're all so different and how we navigate the space is so different.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And my audience is actually quite familiar with Laura Cathcart Robbins because she came onto the podcast and then she also was a guest. We did a special event with her around her book through my Sober Edge book club. So really fun connection there. Yeah, she's amazing. And of course, our friend Maggie Clausens has interviewed Laura for the Sober Summit. So yeah, she's kind of a star when it comes to this adjacent part of her story, powerful story. Yeah, and I think it really, again, just opening up the conversation so that people don't have to do it one way. I think that there can be stigma in some organizations around the non-alcoholic beverages. And I think that we're moving past that a little bit and people are allowing people to do what works for them, which is really the way that we should be doing our own, wellness journey and how alcohol impacts our day-to-day and what we want to take away from how we want to move into a healthy relationship, which in my case is no relationship. I became alcohol-free, stopped drinking in 2015, and there just was nothing on the market, really. So I think O'Doul's was the one category. And, it just did not appeal. And so I stayed away from the NA beverage market for years simply because it wasn't really even a, a growing field. And then since my husband followed me a few years later, who he also doesn't drink alcohol. We started playing around with the NA beers as they became more interesting, and we enjoyed them. But the difference is you might enjoy an NA beer when you're out playing a round of golf, but you're not going to drink seven of them, And so, there is a very different relationship that I think happens naturally with these NA beverages. And so my reference is always for people to not assume that they're a slippery slope and not assume that they're not. And simply ask yourself, in what realm would I choose? Why? And you know what? The other thing that's super interesting, Michelle, I'll just segue a little bit here, but I think it's fascinating that when people are drinking and over drinking, we're often hiding how much we're drinking. And then we stop drinking and we might choose an NA beverage like an NA beer to hide the fact that we're not drinking. And it's wild. And it's like, what are we doing to our brain, our poor brain? Like, let's just catch up with what's really going on here. And so I think it's really powerful that something like To Be Honest and your focus product is not about this direct replacement where we're trying to pretend we're not drinking. Instead, we're invited into this elevated experience to use this, like you said, function and form to enhance an adult evening, for example. So I'm really curious about the name. Where did the name come from?
Well, I'll start by saying we're all about intentionality. So, background in health and fitness, and my focus has always been, or my process has always been about being conscious of what I'm putting into my body. I think we all should be very aware of what we're putting into our bodies, whether that is supplements, whether that is beverage, whether that is food, whether that is other things. We need to be aware of what we're consuming, everything from tea to coffee to juices to our food, organic, non-organic, all of the categories, whole foods versus processed foods and everything else. And so I think with drinks, we tend to stray away from that and we tend to not consider them as much, right? You order a cocktail, it maybe has like an aperitif or a different style of liquor in it, and you're not really thinking about what are the dyes in it, what are the fake ingredients, what's actually building out that particular product. So when we launched To Be Honest, and where the name came from, is we really wanted to kind of face up with the honesty, the integrity of what's being put in the product, as well as the alcohol consumption process. And so my husband and I had this conversation. He ultimately came up with the name and came up with To Be Honest. It's kind of representative of a little bit of a younger demographic, or the idiom and phrase, right? To be honest, and you go into whatever you're talking about. But it's ultimately to be honest with ourselves, to be honest with our alcohol consumption. You mentioned that alcohol can be an avoidance tactic, or we're having a replacement, to say that we're not drinking. It's just kind of this muddied conversation. And we wanted each drink and each experience of a beverage to be honest, to be intentional, to be aware. What am I putting into my body? How is this impacting me? Do I want this or not? So often, not only is there pressure involved in the consumption of alcohol, but sometimes it's just such a habit that you do it without even thinking about it. At home, you grab a beer from the fridge, you open it up, you drink it. It just is what it is. You never ask yourself, do I want a beer? Would a beer be good for me right now? Does a beer help me wind down? You're not asking those questions. You're not using either your intuition or your ability to feel through something. You're not being intentional about your choices. You go out with friends, it's happy hour, you get a glass of wine, you just order the Chardonnay because that's what you always order. Did you want to drink in the first place? Are you thinking about the after effects of the alcohol? Are you thinking about what you're going to consume next? There's just so much rote way that we move through life in cycles and again, habits and ways of being and just subconscious patterns and behaviors. And so we designed the brand to confront a lot of those things, to ask yourself, how are you feeling? Are you avoiding something? What do you wake up thinking? What do you do at the end of the day? What do you do when you're in a social setting? If you're nervous or anxious, why are you nervous or anxious? And why do you need a drink or some sort of alcohol to be able to navigate that? And ultimately, the brand was kind of designed around this idea of getting really self aware, being really thoughtful about how you're showing up, what you're consuming, and choosing intentionality, not just in what you're drinking, but the other aspects of your life as well.
I love that so much. Intention is one of my favorite words. And I think it's really powerful to use that disruptive kind of name to share the idea that what do you honestly want? Like we're not even stopping to ask the question, and I think that that's a big piece of this. And so, gosh, it's been so much fun. I took pages of notes. I love that you're in this space. It's really exciting to get to meet you and hear more about an emerging product. Where can people find, to be honest, beverage company? Where can they find Focus, order it for themselves, try it out? What is the best place to explore?
So currently, we only have the one SKU, the gin-inspired option, which is titled Focus. The best place to purchase or find the product is online. It's tobehonestbev.com. And then if you want to just hang out with us, learn a little bit more, engage with us on social media, we spend most of our time on Instagram at tobehonestbev. And that's it.
Awesome. Yeah. And are you in local retail shops down in San Luis Obispo area or parts of California? Are you pursuing that distribution as well?
We'll be pursuing that this year. 2025 is going to be a really big growth year for us. 2024 was more about customer discovery. We only launched in about 5 bar restaurant locations, and we are available on the menu at those places. If you are in the San Luis Obispo area or are visiting Nate's on Marsh, Novo, Flower House, In Bloom up in Paso, the Madonna Inn, and as well as Alchemist's Garden, they all have a full cocktail menu, beautiful bars, excellent locations to check out and to go. We've only been available in one retail location as we kind of tested our sell-through rate and what that looks like, that Slow Ranch Market. But like I mentioned, 2025 is going to be a big year for expansion for us. And we're kind of navigating what that looks like. We're looking at the foundation of either working with a distributor, self-distribution for now. We are available at the new All the Bitter bottle shop as well as Dry Kit down in Los Angeles just to kind of test outside the area. But if you either have a location, know a location where you want to see the product, we'd love to hear from you. And you can do that via email. It's friend, FRIEND, at To Be Honest Bev, and that's TOBE, honest, BEV.com. And so you can reach out, let us know where you'd like to see it. It really helps kind of our direction from a go-to-market strategy perspective to figure out this is where people are looking for this. This is where people want to buy it and how we can kind of grow from there.
I love that. Thank you for all those wonderful tips. I really need to visit the All the Bitters bottle shop. They're not that far from me. And then I could try Focus.
Yes, absolutely. They're wonderful. Like I said, one of the biggest and most wonderful aspects of being a part of this industry is all of the other founders and business owners in this space who are really promoting that alcohol-free, sober, curious lifestyle, as well as just being really welcoming, really supportive. We're helping each other out, trying to sort out, oh, do you use this distribution? Who do you use for packaging? What agency did you use for launching on Amazon? Like all of those questions. And everyone is very forthcoming. So as much as you can, support your non-alcoholic bottle shops at a local level, find the non-alcoholic spaces in the online space, join a community, be a part of it because it's such welcoming, such positive people that you'll really meet and get to be a part of in growing over time.
Yeah, super exciting. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I love your enthusiasm. Can't wait to see what's next for To Be Honest Bev Company. And here's to 2025.
Thanks so much for having me, Terry. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.